Okay, so this video we are going to be looking at reporting psychological studies as part of the research methods section. Okay, so if I can just remind you as you're listening to this video, write down some Cornell notes. If I ask you any questions, just summarize them at the end. And once you've finished, complete the section of your mind map. Then read ahead for some of the textbooks for more ideas and come in ready for your class. Okay, so reporting psychological studies. This is how psychologists who are currently working in the field will communicate their research to other psychologists and the media about what they've done or what they've found and what it means more widely. They follow a very clear structure. And if you go off to university and you do a degree in psychology, you'll need to produce one of these as part of your dissertation. You know, it'll run about 12,000 words, so it'll be a considerable amount of work for you to do it well. So this clear structure we need to be aware of, and we need to be aware of why it has these structures. So I'll run through each of the different sections of a psychological study and say what it includes. So first of all, the title. The title should say very clearly what the study is about. So it's going to include any independent variables and any dependent variables that were under investigation. The title does need to be very clear because it's usually what people will search for on online journal article databases. So it needs to include as much detail as possible, but you know, it's still only the title, so it doesn't have to say everything. After the title, they'll have the abstract. Now what the abstract is for is to save time effectively. If you're a researcher and you want to go and find a bit of research, if you want to do some research and you want to see what's come before you, you will do a data search for as many journals as you can in your particular field, and you'll read the abstract. This is to get an idea what the entire journal is about, so you don't have to wade through 12,000 words of information to see if it's relevant to you. You can read the abstract and go, well, actually, I don't think this is particularly relevant for me. I'll look somewhere else. Or you go, yes, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Then you'll download it and you'll read through it. So the abstract needs to be a very concise, a very short summary of the rest of the information. So it's going to include the research that was done and the findings. It's also going to have a brief description of what the aim of the research was, what the alternate hypothesis, what the experimental hypothesis was, the method that was used to carry out the research, and a short summary of the results. So once the abstract's done, the introduction will be kind of a more slower paced discussion of the general area that's been studied, and they'll go into detail about previous existing theories and other studies that have been ran that are somewhat related to the study that you're about to read about. Okay, your aims and hypotheses. Then this will come in after your introduction. Your introduction is kind of leading up to the justification of why you're researching what you're researching. So your aim will talk about the reason for the study or what the general areas that you're looking at, and then it'll come on with a hypothesis which will include your independent variables. The next section will say how the research has been carried out. This is going to be very detailed, so that if another psychologist would like to replicate your study and see that it is reliable, they could replicate it perfectly. Okay, now they're going to go into some detail about the design of the experiment. So they're going to say whether it's a lab experiment, an interview, or perhaps a case study. They're going to go into some detail about the research design, so whether it's repeated measures, independent groups, or match pairs. They'll also try and be a little self-critical. So if they find there's been any problems within the studies they've done it, they'll try and bring it up themselves. Now, if you look at the other video on peer review, this is the document that's going to be peer reviewed. So if there is a problem and it's noticed by the people doing the peer review, they're going to have much more of a problem with it if it hasn't been noticed by the researcher themselves and in some way addressed. So research design and any potential problems with the design. They'll talk about any extraneous variables and ways that they've attempted to control, so perhaps counterbalancing or randomization. They'll talk about the material, so for example, maybe they'll talk about a questionnaire that they run and the reasons why they've chosen the questions. They'll deal with any ethical issue. They'll talk about any ethical issues that might have came up and ways of dealing with it. If they have given a procedure to the experimenter to run through, so first we've done this, we've done this, we've done this, the standardized procedures will be placed within the design, and any instructions that were given to the participants. There'll also be information about how the data was collected from the participants. So, if they did a questionnaire, it would just be a collection of the questionnaire. If it was experiments, how that information was recorded. It would also have some details about how the participants were gathered. So how many participants were included, what demographics were they from, what sampling method did they use in order to gain those participants, and how those participants, once they were gathered, were placed into conditions. Okay, so after this would come the results. So this is just a reading out of exactly what was found. They're not going to talk about what it means yet. They're just going to say, this is what I found. So first of all will come descriptive statistics. So there would be analysis of the raw data. So there'd be graphs and tables displaying what was found. It would show measures of central tendency, like the mean, and they would have distribution, like the standard deviation of the results. This would then go into inferential statistics. So descriptive statistics show what's been shown. Inferential statistics will give a probability, will show the probability that the results were statistically significant. So this would be through the use of a stats test. So the test that was used is going to be identified. The data we put through the stats test, and it will spit out an observed value, and then this will be checked against a critical values table against one of the levels of significance, so perhaps like 0.05, and then we'll be able to see whether the hypothesis is significant or not. Okay, so once we found out whether the hypothesis is significant or not, the discussion part of it is a discussion about what this means for the research. So with the aims and hypotheses carried out, what does this study mean now that we found a result or not for future research? Again, it's a chance to reflect on the method that was used. Were there any problems that might have undermined this study? If it was repeated, would there be any suggestions about how to repeat it and address those issues? Now that you've found what you have you got any suggestions about for future psychologists and maybe how they could push the research further? Okay, so that's how a journal holds together. It will always contain those areas. People expect them to hold those areas, and it makes the reading of journal articles a lot easier. You might not find they're easy when you actually get to university and start seeing them yourself, but that's certainly, the structure does help. Okay, so best of luck with understanding that. Please ask me lots of questions when you get into class.